And we are live. Sunday Night with Those Guys and Sunday Night with Those Guys is sponsored by
Those guys.
Guys.
What's up, everybody? How are you? Happy Sunday to you. What's up, Herman? And what's up, especially Ryan? How are you, man?
Good, how are you?
I'm good, man. Not happy 9/11, but 9/11 day. It's
Day
what's
of
up, Herman?
remembrance.
Yes,
It's that day.
exactly. What's good, Herman, man?
I'm all right. I'm hanging in there. I've been a little busy here today.
Okay, all right.
Things.
And
I,
I'd like to I'd like to say good night to Sal Mack, who's in Italy. Good morning to those who will listen to this live stream later on in Australia or wake up and listen to it. Good early afternoon to you guys on the West Coast, and I think I got and good late evening show to you guys that listening in the UK. It's about 10 or 11.
You got it. You got it correct now. You got everything. You got everything.
I got it. I got it,
It
man.
all in there.
Yeah, I got it. I'm good.
All
What's
right.
good, Ryan, man? I mean, I appreciate you coming on. We always do as we always appreciate you coming on. And I had to have you on after that little tidbit of news you sent me, considering it's happening here in New York and you don't live in New York anymore.
Right. We got a lot going on in New York.
Well,
Yes.
it's happening all over the place.
Yep.
It's true. It's true. Well, Ryan, did you see there was a surfing record. I don't know if you're into surfing. I'll probably get a copyright strike because I'm going to play the full 1 minute and 19 seconds. But this guy on September 3rd, well, around September 3rd, oh, hold on. Oh, I'm sorry. On September 3rd, this video was uploaded, and this was a video I found out from 2018 of the longest wave ever being ridden in Hawaii. And when I say longest wave, this wave is maybe, I think, dude went for about a mile. And when I say mile, I'm being nice by saying a mile. He rode the hell out the wave. But I have the video here. I'm gonna get a copyright strike anyway. I might as well play the sound, right?
Well, if you give credit to the video and
Yes, the video, for your credit to
the
the
fact
credit
that
will
it's
go
used-
to Mr. Uluwatu from Hawaii. Okay. He posted this video, like I said, on September 3rd. I guess he just discovered it, and people are just thought that it was new or just recently happened. But anyway, this is the longest wave ever ridden, and all I can say is it's impressive because this guy starts here. You got a jet ski following above, riding the wave on top, and this guy is. Look at this mountain peak here at the end. Okay, he's already been going for a few blocks now, and he's doing quite well. Not to mention this average sized man. That thing is maybe about 2 or 3 stories taller than him when he reaches the apex at the bottom. You know, it's about the height of a small house. Think about it. I mean, I apologize for the skipping because of the bandwidth, but there's another
guy
jet
on the
ski.
top.
Yes, I did see him. I did see him. He's over here, right there, surfing in case he goes under and they can recover. But see where the mountain cliff is now? This is well over a mile. This dude is going, and he actually gets tired. I was watching. You see how he stands up right here and relaxes? He's tired about now. Because you know what kind of core strength you have to control a surfboard like that? But he rides it. The cliff is way down here. Not this one here. It's way down here. This is well over a mile that this guy rode that. But kudos to him and Mr. Uluwatu from Hawaii for posting that, because I've never seen nothing like that before. I've seen surfing in Hawaii, but I didn't know it was like that though. Seriously. Anything you guys want to talk about real quick? We got a little time to kill. And
Well, I don't know. What else is going on out there? The big thing on the table was you know, your story. You wanted one thing you brought it to me, the articles that you showed me and some of the information I was checking out on it, but was remote ID. I don't know if you wanted to talk
Right.
about that now
There's
or
some big remote ID news.
Hey,
yeah.
Gary, what's up? I'm sorry, man. Well, yes, remote ID. We can go. Yeah, we can definitely go into this remote ID thing because um, it's an interesting topic, and Ryan, I'd be real interested to know, especially what you got to hear about it, because I have my own opinion, I should say,
On.
and I on this remote ID for drones not being enforced on drone makers until December 16th, 2022. Now, if you remember, at the end of December 2021, there was by the FAA, there was a law, there was something written by the FAA saying that by the end of 2021, all drones produced need to start being prepared or start something to do with remote ID. Start being produced or being ready for remote ID
Well,
at the end of
yes. So
2021.
it was supposed to be September of this year, 2022,
Right.
where manufacturers would have to comply with remote ID for manufacturing. And that's two pronged, right? So the first part of the prong is to say, you as a manufacturer are going to allow the FAA to come in and inspect your facilities. That's a big one, right? And
Right.
then the second one is to say the drones that you are currently producing or are going to produce are going to have remote ID broadcast capabilities built into them. And they had to, I think the last time that I was on, we talked about they were going to have to push that date back no matter what because they hadn't even finalized the protocols uh, to enforce on the manufacturers. So they
Well,
finally came up with the protocols, and that's when they said, "Okay, yeah, we've got to give the manufacturers extra time," and so they pushed that
okay.
out to December.
Now, when you say protocols, now I want to know if we're on the same page here because when you say protocols, that means you need to come up with an actual device or the concept of a device to put these things into motion. And my problem with remote ID and them making these rules were, how can you make rules for something that doesn't exist yet? Herman had mentioned something to that effect as well.
Yeah, so the interesting piece is what they're saying in terms of the rules is not the device itself, but what the device has to do. So the protocols are to say it needs to provide this information on this signal, right? And so this information is going to be things like the serial number of the drone. It's going to be the the data, how the data is built, how it's encrypted, whether it is encrypted or not. It'll be all those requirements that then drone manufacturers are going to say, hey, how can I make something that does this? Right? It's going to have
Right.
to broadcast on this particular FCC authorized channel. It's going to have this particular data string in order to be compliant with the rules. So
But
that's the key.
Ryan, but doesn't that now start calling for outsourcing of parts and pieces from someplace else to be able to create this thing?
It possibly can, right? I think, one of the things, if you look at products, so you take your computer or a pencil or a pen or even a cup, right? Everything has what's
Excuse me,
called
I'll
a,
be right back.
yeah,
Sorry.
so everything has what's called a UNSPSC code, right? So every little thing that is ever manufactured has a particular code, and it's so many digits long, has so many alpha characters, and in order to produce that and be legal, you have to have a code to go with that. So that's what this requirement is saying is you have to provide this particular code. This is the standards that we expect for you to be able to broadcast and be compliant with our requirement. How you do that figure out what is going to be capable to broadcast, that's on you, right? So that's
Right.
research and design. But it was very peculiar, right, that the FAA didn't have all these protocols already announced, because you're right, it takes a manufacturer time to go, all right, we're going to have to use this type of mechanism or this type of product in order to put that thing out.
Right.
In a lot of cases, most of the drone companies already had some type of broadcast because they were working with an RF signal. It's just a matter of how do we get our protocols in place to make that transition actually happen.
Right. So something like DJI, who claim to have been having a broadcast signal for God knows when, because of things like Aeroscope and other devices that are able to get the same information that remote ID is actually looking for.
Right.
Yeah, for the most part. Yep.
Right.
Remote ID went a little beyond that.
Beyond
Said,
that.
yeah, you
Right,
also
yeah.
need to do this.
What color drawers he's wearing? Yeah, I know.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, one of the other kind of interesting pieces in this news, right, this past week, in fact, it was 2 days ago, is the FAA came out and said, oh, we already have several aircraft that are remote ID compliant, that we've already accepted these aircraft as meeting the remote ID rules, and so you'll be able to fly these as approved remote ID aircraft. And DJI, it's like 90% of the list, which we aren't surprised by.
That's
right?
good, and we've known that for a while. Being DJI pilots, you know this information. These drones are already compliant, and this is what I was getting to at that particular. I can't think exactly of what it was called, but at the end of, I remember the FAA put out at the end of December 31st, 2021. Drones needed to start being produced, and I back then was saying DJI is already compliant.
Well, they weren't, because there was no protocols and that compliance, right? So DJI had
But haven't they always transmitted all of this information? I'm thinking from Phantom 4 Pro up.
No, so and that, I think that was the assumption that
okay,
they thought everybody, hey, DJI already does this. Well, they didn't, because they didn't have all the other pieces that remote ID needed to broadcast. And then at the same token, it was a stub in. So they had a software piece that said, hey, I'm remote ID over here, but that was never there was no interconnection, right? So they had the software stub in, but they didn't have the software that was actually doing the broadcasting.
Okay,
so
right.
that changes. Now, in terms of
I understand now. That makes a lot more sense.
In terms of the DJI drones that are currently compliant, you'd be surprised, right? So in terms of the Mini, only the Mini 3 Pro is compliant. And so
right now,
Mini 2, not compliant, right? Right now. So that may change in the future, right? Or the Air 2S is compliant, but any of the other Airs are not.
Exactly.
Mavic 2s, those are not. Mavic Originals, no.
Now,
Mavic
my question is, and I pretty much have an idea for this, but I was mentioning this to someone the other day. I said they should sit around and get a bunch of FPV pilots together and have them construct this chip. And the reason saying, because if the FPV community gets in on it, they're going to make it the size of a thumbnail. Yeah. And if you can make it the size of a thumbnail, they'll be more susceptible to putting this device in their FPV birds as well.
Yep.
Who else is going to be able to put it there?
Huh?
Who else is going to be able to put it there?
Well, this chip, if one was ever made up on the FPV level, maybe you could apply this chip to current non-drones that aren't on this list.
Right, I understand what you're saying, but what I'm saying to you, as far as those boards that you purchase, that you put in these drones, they're not a board. You're not sitting there soldering each piece and wiring the action and putting the board together. You're buying the board pre-built.
Yes.
Right. Right. So the person that builds those boards is the person who's going to have to put that in there.
Understandable,
You
but it was
understand where I'm
like
from?
that. Yes, I do.
But it wouldn't be huge. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
If they wouldn't be looking to make it a big piece if it was something, but if they were actually making that, you understand what I'm saying? If it was
Yes, I
compliant to
do.
have
And
to
the
do this,
reason
it would have to be made on something like that.
and the
Yeah,
reason
I'm
that I'm
listening to you.
suggesting, go ahead.
No, I'm listening to you.
The reason I was suggesting that, but it was just speaking off the top of my head, is because FPV pilots think about weight down to the grams when we build when we build our drones, okay? And we already have receivers out there the size of your thumbnail that can transmit 2 miles, a mile and a half, and flawless transmissions, crossfire operating system I've been using since I've gotten into FPV. I've never had a fail safe at any distance. I've always had video go out, and if you could build a chip similar to that, which I'm sure they will, Ryan and Herman, I believe more people will be susceptible to them in the FPV world.
Yeah, compliance is going to be interesting going forward, especially with FPV.
Right,
Yeah,
right, right.
that is true. I just think that when I from what Lawrence
Herman's
was talking
breaking up
about as
some.
far as manufacturing. Oh, well, that's because let me fix that. All right, does that help any?
Yes.
No, as far as manufacturing and stuff is concerned, they're talking about manufacturing. What is it? That has been pushed back. We said to December 16th.
Right.
And that.
Well, this is the time that they have, Ryan, that they must comply and start producing.
Must be, yeah, compliant at that point.
Right, but there's a lot of drones that have come out within the time period of the, since this is not have shall I say, haven't become a requirement of, that's when they have to be compliant, but they've had notice that this thing is coming and what is required to be done. So they have had time to make some of those drones that they've come out with since then compliant.
Yeah, so I think that's the key, right? Is we've known for more than a year, right, that this was coming. And so those manufacturers knew, all right, we're going to have to figure out something along these lines. We know it's going to have to broadcast. We don't know what it's going to have to broadcast because they didn't have the protocols at that point.
Right.
So if they weren't thinking, gosh, I need to make this system to have broadcast capability, then yeah, they're behind the 8 ball at this point. But if they had said, oh, okay, I need to make this broadcast, but I don't know what it's going to broadcast, as long as they went down that trajectory, right, they're going to be in a great shape to make the December date.
Hey, Ray Kelly.
So I don't think there's going to be much problem. I think we'll see the Autel drones, start to be in the compliance list here in the next month or two. It's just a matter, it's going to take that time for folks to finally get in touch with the FAA and the FAA to give their stamp of approval.
Okay. All right. Well, I look forward to seeing what's happening. I just wish I would know, being an FPV pilot, I just wish I knew what's going on the FPV side of this, because we know camera drone companies are on it and going to be on it. I want to know what manufacturers out there are going to try and get this system over to FPV.
I think everyone will start doing it once it's necessary, because it makes it a lot easier for you to sell the product.
True. And I'm just a firm believer, if you prepare people early and you let them know the snowball's coming before you hit them in the face with it, it's a little less painful than just throwing a snowball and busting them upside the head with it. If that makes any sense. Let everyone know what's to come. I mean, that's all they have to do. And so far, like you said,
Yeah,
Ryan,
Bob.
they've had over a year to comply, right? And
Right.
nobody has made it, and no one has made any attempt to comply. So maybe this is the wake-up call. Because
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you, last night flying here in New York, Ryan, um, where I was flying from in New Jersey, like with the picture behind me, the guy, we went and picked this spot specifically because we knew other places would be hot spots around New York,
Okay.
and we knew that, well, we didn't know for a fact, but we had an idea there would be less drone pilots on this side of New York than on the East River side and the Battery Park and the Brooklyn Bridge area, because those places were flooded. The skies were lit up, man. You could look and see the drones, and it was scary. It was
Yeah.
really scary because as I turned towards the battery, I'm like, green light, red light, green light, a blue light from Ortel, and where we flew from, I could say there were maybe 3 or 4 drone pilots, and everybody did their thing and got out. They cut the lights off, and everyone was like, "All right, it's time to go home."
Yeah.
But it was safe, and fortunately, I have not heard on the news any incidents as of yet. Let's hope, because more and more people are flying drones, bro. In the
Oh
car
yeah.
on the way to where we were going, guys. Someone called and asked this guy, "Should I try and catch the lights tomorrow night?" And he was telling them, "We're going tonight because it's supposed to rain tomorrow and be really cloudy in New York." And he was like, "Wow, I should go tonight, right?" And we were saying, "Yes, you should go tonight." And we don't know if he ever did. Hey, Bob Casey. But Ryan, I had mentioned to you a case that happened here in New York about a gentleman who was flying a drone. Um, Irish national gentleman, 38 years old. He has been a resident of New York City for 12 years. But because he was flying his drone and his drone battery, he wasn't monitoring battery issue, whatever the case was, the battery of his UAV ran out during flight, which caused it to force land. But when it landed, it force landed in the Con Edison power plant in Brooklyn. And what's even more messed up about it is you're not supposed to fly over power plants. I've seen people fly around them, but you're not supposed to fly over them. You know the rules. But to make a long story short, this gentleman, it goes on to say that he went to recover his drone. And of course, I guess they caught him while trespassing. And employees put a pro forma alert out to the police. The employees there said, "There's some guy in here," and he's getting deported back to, where is it, Ireland, because they say his 90-day tourism visa was overstayed by 11 years and 9 months. What do you think about that?
I well, I
Take your time.
well, I just got one question. I get where they're coming from, but do they actually let you go back and like tell your job you can't come back to work and pack up your apartment?
No, he's locked up.
And,
He's
like, do
locked
you
up.
just leave that whole life to go back and
He
like?
didn't have any choice. They arrested him on the spot.
No, I get that. And I understand what he's about to go through too.
He's got a family at home with kids and
Right.
everything.
That's where it gets crazy.
Yeah.
You know, what's interesting is that a lot of people, when we talk about illegal migration, right, they think of folks coming across the border, swimming the Rio Grande, whatever. A lot of that is not the case. A lot of it is, hey, I came to school, I went to college here, and hey, I just decided to stay around. I had a student visa.
I came to visit a relative.
Came to visit. I just kind of stayed around. And this guy's the same boat. I came over for a vacation, and my interest was more to stay. And those folks are undocumented people, and they're undocumented workers. They probably get paid cash jobs. some of them actually do get social security numbers.
He is
Mhm.
a passionate aerial photographer, and he's been making a living doing it.
hmm
So here you have a professional drone pilot slash aerial photographer. I'm interested to know if he had a 107, things like this, because I know there are a lot of professionals who do not have 107s,
No,
or
no.
people. You,
I
you
suspect
understand?
he did
I
not.
suspect right, right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because I think it might have went a little
I'm
different.
hoping you guys are right.
No,
Not the
I don't
same
think he did.
token,
I don't
right?
think he did.
I know that Lawrence, you said, well, you cannot fly over electrical substations or utility
Yeah.
areas. Not true, right? So there is no prohibition over flying over those things unless
There
maybe the
isn't, but
state has one.
that's how I was personally taught.
Okay. Yeah,
I should have stated that.
for the FAA, there are very, very few locations that are listed as
No,
critical infrastructure. Some states do have, Louisiana is, I think, one of them that says, oh, you can't fly over a critical substation, and they list like oil, locations
right.
and electrical plants or whatever. But for the most part, yeah, you can. So yeah, it's more that he went onto the property without permission. That's a trespass.
Yeah. And I applaud the employees because they did not confront him, which it is not their job to do. My
Right.
thing is, I thought these places had security.
They
You'd
do.
think.
Yeah,
They
but the dude
they
just
do.
walked in.
Right.
What's
I mean, security watched them walk in.
But you know what? I can
And
understand that because a lot of times, and I hate to say this, and there's nothing against security companies and or people who work security companies, but I have been flying and I've went to construction sites and walked past the security and asked someone, where's the supervisor or where's the GM and stuff like that. And security just looked at me like I worked there and I didn't have any vest on, no hard hat, but so I understand. But the fact that who would have known you're living in New York for 12 years, you may have a family, you may not, your dog, a cat, fish, a steak in the freezer, ready for you when you come home, and you're flying your drone, and you wind up going out to fly that drone and maybe never going back to that place again, or seeing all the people that you've met and known.
Yep.
It's just a crazy story, but and I'd like to thank Ron for Herman. Ron had sent me that story a couple of days ago, and I was like,
it's a rough one.
so glad, I'm so glad that it was resolved.
That guy probably created an entire life here,
Mm-hmm.
and was working, has a family, and if they're in the same situation, they're not going to show up anywhere.
Well,
Yeah,
you think too, what are the opportunities or the chances that he was risking his life to go get that drone?
that too.
That's scary.
I mean, I walk past backup generators that they like in places that they put up, and hold on a second.
But where did it land? I mean,
It landed
don't know.
inside the Con Ed factory. Inside the Con Ed factory, I assume somewhere out in the open or whatever. But it's just that he went in to collect his drone.
Con Ed plant?
Yes,
wonder if
inside a Con Ed,
high
Con Ed
voltage
electrical
area.
plant.
Yeah.
So it's hard, but all I can say is it's something we need to put out there, let people know it can happen to you. If your drone goes down someplace like a power plant, a gas factory, oil refinery, police precinct backyard, you don't just go walking in there. You find somebody of authority and see if you could resolve the issue that way.
Now,
We had another case in Florida. A guy was flying at a public school, right? And he's flying in the parking lot, FPV. He goes through a gap, lands the drone on the top of the school. And he decided, well, I'll go check it out, see, if I can find any place where it might have access. So all he did was go into the schoolyard through an open gate, right?
Okay.
The trouble is he went through that gate. And so the police came and they said, oh, that is trespassing. And he's like, wait a minute, this is a public school. Yes,
Right.
but there's a gate and it's there for a reason. And it didn't matter to them that it was open. He
Wow.
did not have authorization to be there. And so, yeah, he got booked with trespassing charges. And in that case, he had asked for his drone back. They said, well, we will give you the drone back if you sign an affidavit that says I was trespassing. And he
Wow.
decided,
Wow.
well, I'll do that rather than fight the trespassing charge. So he got his
Right.
$300 drone back in order to take a $200 misdemeanor trespassing charge that's going to sit on his record forever. Not the greatest solution.
That's interesting. It's real interesting because someone had typed in a chat that's just considered a lost drone. Most of the time, hey, Fly Zone Drones, what's good? Most of the time, I've come to find out that if your drone does land, I know of a gentleman here named here in New York who was flying out on Long Island, and he wasn't watching his battery, and it force landed. And he used the Find My Drone app, which helped him get to the drone, but he saw that the drone was in between the property of two homes. But he was catching a sunrise. So now keep in mind, this is about 6:30 in the morning, just before the sun's about to come up. What he actually did was sat in his car, and as it got lighter out, he went and knocked on the door and walked all the way back out the gate in case, someone opened the door and the dog comes running out, which was smart. He went back outside the gate. He said it was a sweet little old lady, and he explained to her that he was flying a drone. He showed his remote, and he showed her the drone. It says that it went down, and she was like, I appreciate the fact that you knocked on my door and asked for it. Yes, you can go look for your drone. And he recovered his drone. Now, who knows? Out on Long Island, you are allowed, I believe you're allowed to have a shotgun on your property. So had someone went out there, it could have gotten a lot, anything could have happened by just going on someone's property,
Yep.
going to collect a drone. Hey, 107, what's up, Fly Zone? But anyway, it's not happy 9/11, but it's 9/11 Memorial Day, and never thought I'd be doing a live stream on 9/11. Here it is 21 years later, and people are still affected and hurt and dying. All kinds of stuff going on with it.
Well,
As far as that remote ID thing, let's see what happens with it.
well,
We have a deadline now. Huh?
well, the manufacturers have a deadline. And
Yeah, but
they talk
we
about
also have one.
compliance. Well, they talk about compliance with the manufacturer and enforcement. I don't know what they mean by enforcement.
Yeah. So for us as consumers, right, our deadline is still out next year, September of next year. There was talk of, hey, is that going to push out because the manufacturer date pushed out? At this point, the FAA has said, no, we still are going to hold the consumers to the September 2023 date. I'm not so certain of that. I suspect we may see another date slide on that, just because the FAA is notorious for letting dates slide. So we'll see.
Letting it slide.
Ryan, right here in New York, where not too far from where I live, they just put up. Well, it's been there, hell, about 15 years. So I guess you could say that's still new. They just put up an FAA building outside JFK airport perimeter in Queens here, and I've been so looking for a reason just to go in this building and do something, say something, hey, is this where I apply for a job? I don't know what it is. Hey, Michael Blaze, I just want to go into an FAA building. Maybe that's what it is.
Or walk in there with your video camera on.
No, so they could tase me at the door?
No.
They're always interested in having
Well,
fast team members.
Well, you know what's funny? That would be a good thing in your favor if they tased you at the door. Because it's a public building. It's a public building for you to walk into, right? Which means your constitutional rights means that you're allowed to video in there.
1983 lawsuit.
Right? You have a major lawsuit.
So you're saying I could call Ryan? Yeah, drone pilot tased in the FAA building. News at 10. What's up, Tony? All right, we're gonna get to the meat of the night. I know a lot of people came to hang out because whenever Ryan is here, people come to listen. Ryan, you're like the
E.F. Hutton.
Yeah, when Ryan speaks, people listen. And the fact that you had sent me this article, by the way, happy belated birthday to your wife. How was your wife's birthday last weekend? Did you do what you were supposed to, and make her happy?
No black balloons.
Okay, there you go. There you go. That's all. That's all. Yes, just me up. Everything is good on my end too, man. Just checking up on you. Always glad to see you guys. What's up, Harley? But anyway, we're gonna get to the meat of the story, and
hey, Harley.
Oh yeah.
The meat of the story has to go with and Ryan brought this to my attention about a week and a half ago, and there's a lawsuit being challenged here in New York City that challenges an outdated drone law. Now, Ryan, I'm going to muff this. So if you can explain what this abrogation drone law is, and I just have to say one thing. The fact that this law was made in 1948, 10 years before the FAA was even created, baffles me. I'm like in awe. So if you can explain everyone what this abrogation law is in New York, that because people read this and they hear this around the world, oh no, you cannot fly a drone in New York, it is illegal, and people today, present day, are still quoting this law. Yeah. So now, if you could explain it, I would appreciate that.
So yeah, what took place is within New York City, right? So there was a lot of wealth, obviously, and the New York City commissioner said, hey, wait a minute, we do not want a helicopter pad on the top of every single skyscraper in the city. Mm-hmm. We do not want, airplanes to land here, there, and everywhere. And so we are going to put in an ordinance that says no more. It's sort of like some states will have an ordinance that says you can't have any more billboards on a highway, right? Because we have way too many. We're gonna lock things down. So that's what New York City did, is say we do not want to have all these airports or heliports or what have you. So we are going to make those restrictions and make the preventative. Right. And now that has translated to say, oh, you can't launch or land a drone because, hey, you'd be taking off, you'd be landing. That's what's prohibited in this abrogation ordinance.
Right. Well, Ryan, can I ask you a question? But didn't that really usher in after the incident that happened with the Pan Am building here in New York and the helicopter incident?
There were several. Yep.
Right. So that made it a lot easier for them to do that, and now we have no buildings in New York with helipads on them. Not
this is true.
Since that Pan Am crash.
Yep.
Well, not the Pan Am crash. The crash at the Pan Am building, which is now the MetLife building. And it used to have a helipad on the roof, and they had a helicopter crash up there. And since then, New York City, no more on top of buildings.
I would like to applaud the company Zizimo. It's XIZMO, Zizimo, for bringing up these issues that we've been trying to address or trying to figure out who we could go to address this issue. Because Zizimo, they specialize in aerial cinematography, and they claim that they have lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue because their First Right Amendment is being
Violated.
is being violated. And I just want to read. I have to read this part here because I would never memorize it. But it says Zizimo views New York City's blanket ban on drones as a First Amendment issue, with the inability to gather aerial imagery interfering with its director's artistic expression, meaning that it should be clarified here that Zizimo allegedly curtailed expression is not a film itself, but rather an act of filming, a motion picture or television program through the use of drones.
Mhm.
And by reading that, they have valid points, and the lawyers that are involved with this also have a valid point as far as to say that in the meantime, an attorney representing the state of New York says skyscrapers are surrounded by 3 airports here in New York. It is not necessary or logical to limit takeoff and landing sites to maintain safety and security in the city. And I'm like, well, if he's a lawyer for New York City and he's saying this, and the judge is saying this, is what, Ryan, where are they going with this? That's what's confusing.
Yeah, right. So, there's a couple of different things in here. Number one, Zizimo could have taken this to state court, right? Or you've got a city that's locking things down. Hey, I'm going to go to state court and challenge them on their land use ordinance. In this case, Zizimo said, you know what? No, I'm going to go to federal court because I'm going to chase this as a First Amendment issue.
Right.
And in doing that, they have an interesting argument, right? One, they're saying, yes,
thank you for the super chat. I'm sorry.
Oh, there you go. So one, they're saying, hey, you've locked me down and I can't express myself in my artistic talents because of that, right? But they're also chasing this on a conflict preemption basis. Now, when I get involved and you hear preemption, you go, oh, I know what that means, right? So preemption is obviously that a higher government entity has already occupied the field such that a lower entity is now an obstruction of that. So what we're saying in this preemption basis is that the federal government has all jurisdiction, right? And the New York government is trying to hone in on that, right? And the federal government is the FAA in this case, where the jurisdiction of airspace is the sole jurisdiction of the FAA. And the argument is such that the city of New York is preventing me from getting access to the national airspace. And that's the preemption.
And see, here's the issue that Zizimo's, like you mentioned, the main issue that they're having. They are all 107. They are all 107 drone pilots. They do comply by going to the city. If they have to shoot a commercial in Manhattan or someplace, they do go to City Hall or wherever they have to go to apply for waivers. They do this well in advance, and then the city turns around and gives you permission to fly, and then the police are running up on you, telling you got to shut this down. You got to shut this down. You can't fly in New York. The police have no. You understand? It's a catch.
Well, see, that was something that I was trying to explain to you on previous shows once before. And New York City has already have something in place for filmmakers, that is called, I think the way they can apply for where they want to shoot and when they want to shoot. And the city automatically puts those permits together from whichever organization that they need them from.
Yes.
And they put them together and they grant you the approval to operate in that area. So I don't understand why they're having such problems with New York City. the other thing that I found interesting from some of the information that was read, that even with this judge that I mentioned this to Lawrence before the stream, you know, talking about the safety and security issues, you know, these things haven't even been presented yet, that they don't even make these arguments as to what safety and what security is being
Issues are
that
what
when with flying with for certified pilots flying outside of these parks in New York City. What safety issues and what security issues does it present?
right. It the fact that they're mentioning the safety and security issues, and but no one has any direct list, is sounds.
I don't know.
Ryan, where do you think, what I mean by where do you think they're going to go with this? I mean,
Yep.
Zizimo has a good case here.
Well, yeah. So they have a really good case, right? So in this case, the judge has said, all right, we are going to allow this to proceed. And what that really does, right? It doesn't say, hey, I've made a decision in this case, right? It says, I like the merits of this case. There's enough here in terms of questioning that we really need to look at the legalities and come up with a true decision, because we do have a conflict between the two parties. So they recognize the conflict, and then they agree with the proposition, right? That, hey, you might be prohibiting access to the NAS because you are prohibiting where an aircraft lands or takes off. And that may be part of the FAA's jurisdiction as well, right? So it probably a great example. I can't just say, hey, my next door neighbor, I don't want you to have an airport, right? I can't do that. But at the same token, right, my neighbor can't just come over, knock on my door and say, hey, I stood up an airport. Sorry, I'm going to land Cessnas on my property.
Right.
They have to go through an awful lot with the FAA to make that happen. So here we have New York City saying you can't have any airports throughout our entire city. Well, they haven't cleared that with anybody, right? They just made the law. So that's what this is questioning, is can they do that? And by doing that, they've made some prohibitions on aircraft that really don't need, a takeoff runway, right? I think the more interesting challenge here is going to be, if you allow drones to fly anywhere, right? So right now, and we have this problem where all the mayors of big cities will say, basically every street corner is an airport. They're right? I can go down to any street corner and launch my drone because I don't need a very large spot in order to take off from. I need 18 inches square, and I can go straight up. At the same token, what's wrong with that? Right? Is there a real safety issue? We haven't had any fatalities with a drone ever.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
A multi-rotor has not killed anybody.
Correct.
We've had, the last fatality was 2013, and that was an RC helicopter, right? We aren't talking about RC helicopters here, right?
You're right, because I'd like to point out, last night I was out getting photos like the one behind me, and I pointed out to you guys, I mentioned earlier, there were lots of drones in the air, and the fact that they did slow down airspace. There weren't a bunch of tourist helicopters out, because around the memorial, for some reason around 9/11, they don't want a lot of aircraft. But there were sporadic air helicopters here and there, whatever. But the point I'm making is, I did not hear on the news, and I mentioned it earlier, with all of the drones that I saw in the air, with all of the drones that are being flown, like on a day like today and yesterday, 9/11, and on the holidays, the 4th, we have not heard of any incidents with drones. And that's a plus on our side.
Yep, absolutely.
It's a plus on our side, because if people conform and fly the way they're supposed to fly and follow the rules, just like the airports have to do, just like delivery companies, you have a set of rules in order to operate your business. If you want to fly a drone, you have to follow a set of rules as well to fly safely and keep people safe. But this company Zizimo, I'm happy for them, and I'm just surprised that I didn't hear nothing about this, Ryan, until you sent it to me, and I was like, what the?
Well, I wouldn't be so
I live
happy
here in New
about
York,
this.
and I didn't hear anything about this.
It's just crazy that they're having these issues.
Yeah, well, the reason that they want to go to court also is they say in the article, in the story here, that they have lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in the last few years due to getting permits. I mean, getting waivers. You have to apply for permits. You have to let local police stations know that you're in the area. Hey, Lake Pilot, all kinds of stuff. They're doing what they're supposed to, and then a set of cops will come up out of nowhere or and say, you guys have to shut it down. You can't do this here with the permits and everything that they have. I don't get it. Is there a way to get around this, or you just have to comply?
Well, I don't know.
Yeah, and that's one of the interesting things in terms of the judge's decision here, right? So New York City had filed a motion to dismiss with the judge.
Right, that's scary.
And what they were saying is, hey, just wipe this thing off. It's, it has no merits whatsoever. Get off the books. And the judge said, now, wait a minute. You have issued permits, right, which allow for this person to operate in this location. And then you said, oh, well, I'm not going to allow you to fly there because I believe that could be a safety concern. And the judge said, well, wait a minute. You issue a permit for a protest to take place. So if you're going to allow a protest to take place in an area, and his quote was calling for a protest to end the violence and conflict in colors of communities of color, right? If he said, if you do that on Randall Island, it can't communicate the same message as would happen in Harlem.
True.
And so he's saying to the New York City fails the motion to dismiss. He's saying, look, you fail on your attempt because you're trying to force something. You're forcing a location based on your own best interests that have no interest in what you're arguing. So, you're saying safety concerns. Show us the safety concerns. We aren't seeing them, right? You're giving us.
If drones were dropping out of the sky,
right,
I could see them being concerned. If birds were hitting drones, I get more birds looking at me out the side of out of their eye than trying to knock me out of the sky.
Well, see, that's what I was saying to you before. They've made argument, but there's no list of concerns or safety issues that they've claimed that can be even concerned for, because they want a drone pilot to fly within the parks of the city, that is designated for RC flight. So my thing is, so what is the major concern? What is the security? What is the safety that no one seems to know?
And this is a question that I may have for you, Ryan, because we deal with this situation a lot here. I've had people from the Parks Department. I understand you shouldn't fly from the beach between Memorial Day, which starts the summer season, and Labor Day. That's peak summer. I respect it, and I do what I can to oblige. But we've actually had Parks Department people come up to us and pull out a book and state that it is illegal to fly drones in New York, and it's that 1948 rule that they know nothing about. We had this situation happen here, Ryan, here in New York at a meetup. These guys came up, they pulled out a book, and we actually, the group of guys that were there, hey, Jerry Franks, actually schooled him and suggested he ask his supervisor to revise their information, because the law that he was stating was from before drones were even made.
Yep.
And he was cool about it. He was like, well, we were questioning his authority and we were questioning his supervisor's authority, who told him to read this to people who are flying drones. And he left completely cool with it. And we actually enlightened him as to maybe something needs to be changed to these laws, because people are quoting a law from 1948, man.
Yep.
Today, present day, they're
What do you thought
recording.
that was going to change?
There are websites out there that say if you see someone in New York, if you see someone flying a drone in New York, here's a number to call. Here's a police officer's. It's crazy, man.
Yeah, not too long ago, we had an individual who was flying in New York at the UN headquarters, right? And we had the police from New York come to say, hey, you cannot fly here. Well, think about this. Is the UN headquarters New York City?
No.
No. it's its own separate entity,
Yes.
right?
A lot of people did not know that.
And so you had this New York City cop coming and saying, hey, you can't fly here. And the UN is saying, you don't have any authority here. What are you talking about?
So it's interesting to fly here. What I do appreciate and what I'm finding out is more people are learning to fly the right way here in New York than the wrong way. And I'm really happy and proud about that, because there are a few people, and there's a few people everywhere. Like, you can't run from crime. There are a few pilots out there that need a pat on the back and a hug. You know, but for the most part, we seem to be doing okay here in New York. And I just wanted people to know, because I constantly get this, even when I'm flying, since I've been flying the 6.5, almost 7 years. Can you fly that here? You're not supposed to fly that here. You can't fly that here. Wow, you can fly that here.
That's
I've gotten all of it.
You know, that's how the young lady that came to that meetup we had, and that you showed her how to fly a drone, and Big Matt and them got her drone started.
Yes.
That's
Would you please tell Ryan of this incident, please?
That's
I'm
actually
glad
how
you brought
I
that up.
actually met her, because she commented on one of my videos. She goes, the police didn't stop you. They didn't just run up on you and stop you from doing that. They let you do. She's like, they let you get away with that? I'm like, get away with what? Like, I'm not doing anything wrong.
Right. But for the most part, most people don't know, right, Ryan?
Exactly. And I think that's the trouble, right? Is that the FAA themselves has done a dismal job in terms of educating police officers. They've done a even more
As far
dismal
as
job in terms of educating the public,
the government and the public. I agree.
That's what I was saying.
A shitty job at it.
Yep.
Yeah, your friend Chantel. That's how I met her. And when she came to the meetup straight from Best Buy.
Yes, Brian. She took an Uber from Best Buy to the drone meetup. Whatever power the batteries had, we had them charging. We flew 2 different spots,
and set it up from the phone and everything right there so she can get a drone up in the air.
Oh my.
I'm just answering someone in the chat. For the most part, police are curious about it. It's just you have a few. At one time, Ryan, here in New York, it was kind of bad to be a drone pilot, because police were illegally confiscating people's drones and saying you could come to the precinct to claim it, but the drones were never making it to the precinct, and people weren't being penalized for it, etc.
Yeah.
Well, you know what I've run into here a couple of times? Guys that actually fly. Other officers that fly drones. And I, especially at Orchard Beach, that's why I first encountered that situation. But what I have also noticed is that for the other 2 times that the police have encountered me on while flying, once I show them my credentials, they get back in the car and go away.
Yeah. I'll say that I've seen 2 different groups that have significant troubles with drones. And the one is police, where they're just incredibly uninformed. And I don't think it's their fault that's happening. I don't think that information is getting to them. But they'll have old information, right? Oh, you can't fly at night. Says who? Do you know the law? Because that's not the case. And the other group is AMA, unfortunately, where we have an older set of AMA folks who are very much into model aircraft, the big 5-6 foot airspan wings, and they are not keen on drones. And so they'll say, oh, you can't fly a drone here. They don't know, or they're trying to force their own club rules on you.
Exactly.
And I think that group is actually rather dangerous because they have some weight with elected officials. They're going to cities and saying, hey, don't allow drones in your city because we want them to go to our club and fly at our location and pay our dues, right? And that's a real challenge, because if you're into that situation, now you're not going to be able to fly drones except in a cornfield.
It's true. Well, with this abrogation case, I like the fact that the judge has pointed out that drone pilots are flying outside of designated areas with no problem.
No issues. Yep.
And all of this stuff, if you remember, Ryan, 5 years ago, a judge couldn't say jack about a drone law or rules because there were none.
Yep.
But with all these things happening across the United States, with the cases like that you deal with, is there any way you could give us a briefing on what happened with that Fort Hamilton case?
Yeah. So that's still a sore thumb. We made a FOIA request.
Hold on, before you do, if you can give a brief synopsis of
absolutely,
how the case that was brought to you.
So yeah, what came about is young gal had been flying a drone
here in New York.
And at Fort Hamilton, or near Fort Hamilton, I should say.
Yes.
Capturing pictures of a bridge. And as she was bringing the drone back to her location, she was crossing over Fort Hamilton. And when she did so, there was no control, right? Everything blacked out for her, and the drone started to descend without her controlling it at all, which speaks to some type of counter UAS
device
activity, right? Some device was bringing that drone down. So it crash landed on the property. She went to the fort and said, hey, I had a drone. Can I come retrieve it? They brought her into the fort. They put her into an interrogation room, and they railed on her, and they tried to make her into a forced concession speech to say that she committed crimes and she would have none of it. She ended up writing to them, here's exactly what happened. And so at that point, they told her, we're gonna charge you with a crime, and they wouldn't tell her what crime. And so we made a FOIA request to the federal government to say, provide us all the information that you have on this incident. We want all the records. With a FOIA request, the federal government has 21 days in order to provide that information. That's the law. We made the FOIA request back in June. We still do not have the records that we've requested. Wow. They popped it around to multiple different FOIA request administrators. They finally got it over to one person that they said, this is the absolute person. And then 2 weeks ago, that individual wrote to me and said,
Works there?
are you what, we need some information to show that you're the attorney for this individual.
Oh, they won't release any information to the, wow.
Right. So then I said, well, I'm not that person's attorney, and I do not need to be that person's attorney. I'm following the regular rule of law. Do you want to challenge on that?
Right.
I haven't heard from them since. I did send a little follow-up note to say I'm waiting for those records, and their next step is, going to be to file a federal lawsuit. So, and that was on Friday of so a couple days ago, 3 days ago. So we'll see where we head next, but I am anticipating that at some point they're going to have to give those records over.
So do you think if they do give these records over, what are the chances of them, if they giving her a drone back or reimbursing her for her drone?
Well, that's kind of the interesting thing, right? Is right now what has happened is they've done what's called conversion. So by keeping the drone in place without making any charges, they've now possessed the drone. It's become theirs. They've converted it to their own property.
Right.
So by law, they have to replace that with her. So even if it's crashed and let's say it's obliterated on the ground, because they converted it prior to it crashing, obliterating on the ground because of their counter UAS. So they owe her a brand new drone, right? That'd be really nice to have happen. Now, do we get there? We don't know yet, right? We want to make sure that we get either charges filed, because if we get charges filed, then we can go to court and say, here's why these charges are bogus, get her off.
There's actual documentation that they were in the wrong.
Right.
Well, Ryan, can I ask you a question there? Is there a possibility that they will say that, well, here's your property and it's smashed, and that they didn't convert it into their own property and say, well, here's your property back, and just give it to her like that?
And that is a solution, right? They could say, yep, here's our, we found it on our property, it hit a tree or whatever. We don't know how it came down, but we'll give it back to you. That's fine. They could do that, right? But what we want now is those records, right? So if the records come back and it's clean, to say, hey, they haven't talked about it with anybody, they didn't have, the federal government, especially the military, is great on record keeping. So if they use the counter UAS device, it's going to be on record, right? And once we have that, now you can go back to the officer and say, hey, wait a minute.
But they're also good at telling you what you need to know. And is it possible that you would hear that, well, here's your drone, sorry about that.
And that's why I think they came back to say, hey, are you her attorney? Right? What do we really have to tell you versus what can we hide?
I just wanted to point out, for those who weren't paying attention, this also happened here in New York City, in the 5 boroughs, and I just want to point out,
I'm curious to know which plant he landed in and where he was flying from.
I'm
looking at them on the map.
There's only a handful of Con Ed plants in Brooklyn. If you think about it, there's
There's a few of them, but I'm like, which one did he fly from that he could have went into?
That's what I'd like to know too. How he got past security when the cars have to stop for security to get into these places. He just walked in. He walked in with a lunchbox. What? I mean,
he just walked past the gate.
Yeah, but
what they're gonna do? Tackle you?
Even cars have to stop at these gates most of the time. So to have a person just walk in off the street with plain clothes, no vest, no hard hat, well, I've done it on construction sites.
But I'm saying, what are they gonna do? Tackle you? That's why they watched them.
This is true.
They just like to watch them walk in there.
Well, Ryan, I'm still waiting for you to assign Herman and I as advocates here in New York City for anything drone related, as far as abrogation laws that are in question. The point I'm trying to make is we need to make New York like the rest of those states. If you
Right.
can explain what I'm talking about to other people, you have how many states following?
Yeah, so Michigan is one of the first states in the nation to pass a preemption law, and that preemption law is one that says any local government cannot create or enforce their own drone ordinance. So
Okay.
literally the only two
Okay.
entities then in the state of Michigan that have an opportunity to create drone laws or drone regulations are either the federal government, the FAA, or the state of Michigan themselves. And the state of
Right.
Michigan, is preventing everybody else from doing so. So we want to expand that out. 17 states now have that preemption clause. New York is not one of them. We want New York to be one of them. Just to south and east is going to be New Jersey. They do have that preemption clause. And to your west, Pennsylvania has that as
Yeah.
well. So it makes sense for New York to join the other 17, put that in place, especially because if we get to a situation where the FAA relinquishes any low altitude airspace, let's say they come
Right.
through and say, hey, we are not going to have jurisdiction over, the first 200 feet of airspace. Well, if we don't have a state preemption clause in place, every single township,
Everybody's gonna
county,
jump.
blah blah blah, they're going to create their own, and it's going to be a patchwork quilt nightmare for drone
Well,
operators.
what I'm experienced. I haven't experienced it, but I know a few drone pilots on Long Island that live in one town. That may live in Suffolk, and they wanted to fly in Nassau County, and went through the proper procedures to fly by contacting City Hall, saying, "I'm a drone pilot. I would like to fly in this area. I'm letting you know that I can fly here." And the towns are telling him, "Oh, well, you have to pay a fee to fly in that area. And if it rains on that day, you have to pay another
You're out
fee if
that
you want
fee.
to come
Yeah.
back."
Yeah.
And that's not cool.
Well, you think about it, for me, I go on what I deem as drone vacations, right? I'll go away for a week. I'm going to drive everywhere I can, and I will fly a ton, right? If I've
Right.
got to sit down and plot out, hey, I'm going to this city, do they have a drone law? I've got to waste time and effort trying to figure out each individual location where I don't even know if I'm going to be there or not based on the weather, the wind, whether it's raining, cloudy, etc.
Okay.
It's that's a challenge.
I have a question here. I asked in the chat if anyone had any questions, and Ray of Sunshine
got a
had
question?
asked, how are the laws different for flying at night when it comes to hobbyists versus remote Part 107 pilots?
That's a great question. So one of the interesting pieces was that under 107, when it was originally put in place in 2016, said that you could not fly at night without an FAA waiver. And so several pilots would go through that waiver process to be able to fly at night. That changed in 2020, was it 21, 22, 21? April of 21. And so if you had taken a training by the FAA as a Part 107 pilot, you no longer had to get a waiver in order to fly at night, and you could do so. Now, hobbyists, they never had a restriction on being able to fly at night. So all throughout 2016, if you were a hobbyist, right, you could fly at night while the Part 107 was stuck on the ground. And
yeah,
and the FAA kind of looked at that and went, well, wait a minute, is that
That's
right?
kind of ass backwards.
And so what happened is in 2018, with the passage of the FMRA of 2018, the rules changed, right? So now suddenly we had a need for the recreational pilot needing to have airspace regulate or access. So instead of what was it? You had to call and notify only if you were within 5 miles of an airport. Suddenly now you had to use Lance, right, to get an airspace authorization for any controlled airspace. So in May of 2019, that went into place. And so recreational pilots were no longer able to fly at night except in Class G airspace. And that continues to this day. So if you're a recreational pilot, Class G, have at it. Go any place you want. That's great. Fly it at will. If you're in controlled airspace, you cannot fly. You got to have a Part 107.
And for those of you who don't know what Class G airspace is, if you download the app before you fly, it will tell you what airspace you are in. You can ask for land authorization. It does have a notify and fly function, which they do claim that they are not responsible. And a notify and fly is for an area, say like a 107 pilot that needs to fly in an area for a pay job, and it's under shielded operations, let's say around a building, the outskirts of a building. This notify and fly will put up a bubble around you for 1 hour. And they do say before they give you this permission, they are not responsible for what happens, and you cannot say that they said it's okay for you to fly. You're just notifying everyone and letting them know that you're in the area. I suggested, and go ahead, Herman.
Look at it. Finish what you said.
Hey, Sunrise Media, I just suggest, if you don't know what Class G airspace is, the Before You Fly app will work. It shows you where you are.
Well, Class G airspace is usually found in the lowest shelf or outer perimeter out of the airport space.
Right, but for those who don't know, like we know because we're 107 pilots, but a hobbyist is like, what the hell is Class G airspace? Before You Fly will say whether it's Class B or any other type of airspace. If it's Class G, you won't need authorization.
Yeah, probably the easiest, right, is to be able to say, if you are outside a 5-mile perimeter of an airport, you're in Class G.
Yes,
if you're within 5 miles perimeter of an airport, that airport may or may not have controlled airspace, and so you really want to look at Before You Fly or a loft. One of those applications will be able to tell you, hey, this is controlled airspace. You can or cannot fly here. Now, a hobbyist, right, they can fly in controlled airspace during the day. They just have to get that airspace authorization.
That land authorization, yes, which is usually given to you.
Well, see, but that's what DJI products become confusing. You're not necessarily flying in the airspace. You're flying under it.
Yes,
and they still
DJI sees it
authorized to fly under it.
But DJI sees you as being in that airspace.
Yeah, unfortunately, so many people assume that the DJI geofence matches up with controlled airspace.
Nope.
It does not.
No.
And so if you are looking at relying upon your DJI to tell you where you can or cannot fly, you're already in the wrong. Right.
Brian,
you need to be looking at things.
Brian, I have the perfect example. While you're talking about it, I'm actually stalling to pull it up. But this particular hospital where I'm trying to pull up is has been shut down for 10 years. And I'm pulling it up on the map here. And it used to have a heliport. Okay. And I have it here. I can share it now so you guys can see it. It's strange because DJI, for the last 3 years, they let you know that you're coming up on this area, but before those 3 years, you couldn't fly in this area.
They'd lock it down.
This is a 10-acre lot right here, and right here is the heliport.
Yep.
Okay, and of course, this heliport has a bubble around it. And it lets you know you're entering restricted airspace and you're exiting restricted airspace. But at one time, and I've reported this spot 20 times at least to DJI.
Oh, yeah.
And it is still not up to date. Here it is 5-6 years later. So what you say is very, very true about that.
And that's a challenge, right? So a lot of their geofences will lock down Class G airspace. It will not allow the motors to even fire up to launch because it says you are in prohibited airspace. And yet you're like, wait a minute, that airport closed 10 years ago. I'm sitting here and I can fly here. I'm Class G, let me go.
Right.
Part 107 pilots really hate it, right? Because I've gone out and I've made a request on the drone zone to fly above the grid. I'm in a zero foot grid. I went out, I did all the authorizations. I got 75 feet. I go to launch my DJI drone and I can't fly here. I got to go through their unlock process.
Authorization restricted.
Right.
But Lance, I must say, Ryan and Herman, Lance has gotten so much smarter through Before You Fly, because now they're realizing, they're asking, are you a recreational or commercial pilot?
Well, they've asked that for quite some time now.
They have, but it wasn't actually working. Now it's working on point. You can fly as a 107 pilot in places where recreational pilots can't fly. I mean, thus being the purpose of it. But now the app is really fine-tuned. I've liked the updates that they've done. And like I said, the notify and fly isn't an excuse to fly in restricted airspace. I must stress that. It's not an excuse to fly and say, hey, I'm over here flying in restricted airspace. If you have to use it, I suggest use it. If it's for a paid job, of course. If you're a 107 pilot and you want to fly under shielded operations under the trees, use it.
Well,
you understand what I'm saying, Ryan?
I wouldn't use that terminology until it's actually classified.
I know. I'm trying to get them used to it early. I'm trying to get them used to it early, man. If they start hitting shielded operations in 2022, by the time it kicks in 2024, they'll be like, yo, I heard that before.
It'll be longer than that.
Remember.
I know.
They won't remember.
2028 maybe.
Here's a question for you, Ryan. It's worked since the day of Aloft. Okay. Here's a question for you, Ryan. What do you think, and what is your opinion, or where do you think they're going with this Part 108 certification that the FAA is trying to come up with, flying beyond visual line of sight? I see you gritting your teeth. Take your time. Let it out slow.
Well, okay. So when we talk about flying beyond visual line of sight, I think the first and foremost thing that has to come to mind is being able to recognize aircraft in the same airspace, right?
Yes.
So automatically we know that no beyond the line of sight is going to be allowed on a large scale until we have a couple of things. One, remote ID, right? The FAA has already said straightforward, we cannot have anything until we get a remote ID. So
right.
That's starting to play out. We're going to see that take place. The other is going to be that you have to have a traffic system that's able to monitor
unmanned traffic management system.
So so we have the UTM, right? Unmanned traffic management. And so, NASA has worked on that for, I don't know, probably 12, 15 years. It's been a while. Are they at a point of releasing it? We haven't really seen a full beta model setup. So no,
right.
That could still be a while. So I think the talk of 108 is still a bit premature. I think we start to get there in 2023 is end of 2023 is when we get remote ID. And so now 2024 rolls in. At that point, we can start the conversation about how do we get to a point of having our UTM come into play, and how is that going to work? One of the other interesting questions is, once you have beyond line of sight, which drones or which aircraft get priority of one another? Obviously, if you're going to fly a drone that's delivering a heart, that's the high priority drone.
Versus Jerry Franks.
Anything else?
But Ryan,
go ahead, Herman.
The reason why this becomes an interesting topic is because, we've reached the limitations of 107. And 107, and I stress this, and I say this, and I've said this for years. I said this a lot. You cannot fly beyond the visual line of sight. So this is why companies like Matternet, you know, and others that have received their certification to be able to operate as an airline, a drone airline.
Part 185, correct?
They've got the Part 135
Oh,
as
135.
carrier,
Okay.
the carrier certification to be able to operate beyond the visual line of sight. Those are the only ones that have been able to do such.
One quick question, real quick. Jerry Franks had asked, and you had answered this, Ryan, earlier in the live stream, but so we can answer it anyway. Are there any companies providing drones with built-in remote IDs yet? Yes.
Qualified, yes, right?
Yes, right.
So we have drones that they've been certified to have remote ID or will be, you know, remote ID capable once it goes live. DJI is at the top of that list. There are a couple others that have drones on that list. They are not yet broadcasting that information.
Right.
So that's still a process yet to take place.
Right. But technically, if you look at DJI, they're looking real good in the game.
Yep.
They're looking real good in the game as far as being able to comply. Recovery One drones. Didn't Pilot 101 put out a list of drones? I skipped past it. Hey, what's up, Draymond?
Yeah, so there is a list. So you've got the DJI M30s, the Mavic 3s, the new Avata, that's covered, Air 2S, Mini Pro. Those are DJI drones that are approved for remote ID. Wingstra and Micro drones are the only two others currently approved for the declaration of compliance.
Well, all I can say is, guys, you don't have to worry for another 2 years at least. I mean, everyone's going remote ID. If you remember, Ryan, 2 years ago, people were saying, oh, they're talking about this thing called Lanc or Lance, and they're going to tell us how high we have to fly. Well, everyone's complying with it. Everyone has conformed to it, and it hasn't been a problem or thorn in anyone's side, has it? In fact, it's helped drone pilots.
Yes and no. So I share that. I've had access here lately to some aerial armor data where we are tracking drones, right? We're looking at drones and their points in the sky, how, you know, where they took their home points, where they've flown, how high they go. Some of the data that I've seen is just incredible. Folks are taking drones to 1,800 feet, 2,400 feet. And these are like Mavic Minis, right?
Yeah, I know.
It is scary.
When you see stuff like that in Asia all the time.
Yeah. And part of it is I saw the other day, we had a police department who got their Phantom 4 drone out, and they flew it up to 700 feet. And you kind of go, wait a minute, a police department should know the rules, and you're breaking it. Okay.
Well, you'd be surprised.
No, I think that is something that Lance has done a very good job of helping in the circumstance for the people who are aware of it, in the know of it.
Thank you, Dan, for the super chat, man. I'm curious if people would still eat Cheerios. They didn't have a hole in the center of them. These questions plague me daily. Hey, Dan, you know you got issues, right?
Mini donuts.
He says, I'm curious if people, thank you for the super chat, Dan, first of all.
Thank you very much.
Because I'm curious if people would still eat Cheerios if they didn't have the hole in the center of them. These questions plague me daily. But listen, Dan.
Sure they would. They call it honeycombs.
Listen, guys, it's that time.
Wow.
It's that time. Ryan, if you could be around me during normal day life, the day would go like that. Seriously, man. But we appreciate you always, and I'm glad you explained this to me, because when you had sent this to me about the aggravation law, I'm so tired of hearing people quote, oh, you can't fly drones, and the Parks Department of New York City has this in their book of rules to show people it's illegal to fly in New York, but it doesn't
Because
say
they're
from 1948. What's that,
because they're
Herman?
part of the compliance of trying to funnel you into one of those parks that they have not yet explained what is the security or the safety of you
Yeah.
not flying in those parks.
True, true. But you want to put any plugs in for anything coming up you're doing, Ryan? You too, Herman?
Well, anything I got coming up, you know what I got coming up.
Wednesday night.
Wednesday night we'll be back on, and Lawrence and I had a nice nice experience on Jamaica Bay the other day.
Yes, yes,
That'll
yes,
soon
yes.
come to video.
We
And
met a guy really quick, and we'll get out of here. We met a guy really quick. His name is Hank. He's 70 years old. This
yeah,
dude paddle boards faster than some people can kayak.
and he actually teaches, and he's the guy that actually hired us to do a little thing for him, and he actually hired us for a job to promote what it is that he does, and with that, and the news was it News
New
One?
York One.
Yeah,
New York One.
New York One was doing a story on him, and New York One asked me for footage, asked me for the aerial footage for for his the whole story they did on him on the news. So with that, it all came into a whole thing, and then now we end up doing something that we're going to probably do a little video for YouTube with it.
Yeah.
That
Yes.
he's big on cleaning up the environment and making
Yes. He'll be paddle boarding and see something floating in the water, and he'll pick it up. He'll paddle over and take it out the water. It's a very good story. Herman is Martin Scorsese of us both. He's in the lab with it. I have to bring him an SD card with flight footage, but we have a video coming out with Hank. Very nice gentleman. We appreciate you all. I turned 60 this year. Lawrence, 70 is not too far off. Wow, you old. No, I'm just playing. We love you, Mike Roach. We appreciate you all. Thanks for checking us out. Ryan, thank you again.
Thank you for having me on.
We want to be those advocates in New York, man, to get this thing going.
There, definitely.
All right. You said Jersey is next door. We're the next state over.
Absolutely.
All right. And with that, I'm going to say Sunday Nights with Those Guys is sponsored by Those Guys. Good night, everyone. Thank you for the support. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. And with that, we are clear.